I do peer review for the International Drug Journal. And one of the curious things that struck me, the way the rest of the world is handling the drug situation, or social policy in general, is they have a rule that social policy must be based upon real evidence. So, for instance, after making it a misdemeanor, the Conservative Party in England tried to make marijuana a felony again, and they couldn't justify it with actual evidence on which to base their policy. So, our policy is based on propaganda rather than actual reality. So the actions are public relations based, and people, you look clear back to the Watergate days, every one of the White House crooks or whatever, they said they had law degrees or they're lawyers. They weren't really practicing lawyers, they had law degrees, but most of them worked in the area of public relations, which the press seemed to ignore. So you've got this Southern bill, there's Southern lady coming up, taking charge of the whole DEA, and one of the big functions of an administrator on that level is that you're the cheerleader. And I think she can't really come in with the voodoo science or the false science because of what's happened before. She doesn't really have a good handle on what the state constitution says or doesn't say. So what she can say is there's no evidence that it causes any good. And you then tie that in with the driving under the influence of drugs, where they're using voodoo science, and this is the drug administration that's doing it, the drug cartel, the domestic cartel of law enforcement, which Sally Denham wrote about years ago. Which then, this whole thing is real sophisticated. And it's frustrating for me from my point of view because a lot of people just don't have the social history or the interest or whatever. They don't know how to read newspapers and draw the right conclusions. So, for instance, many of us have been trying to get sentences reduced on criminal offenses. We lock up more people than anywhere else in the world, and sentences are longer, etc. We touched about that earlier. The ACLU has been trying to get Boulder to cut out sentences on municipal violations. Now, I was arrested after being in the hospital, thrown in jail, and put in solitary confinement because I wouldn't sign a blanket release when I was walking around with pneumonia. And they did put me in the solitary thing to punish me because I wouldn't sign a blanket release. And I posted an article about that. And I've watched then, I was more conscious of what the city is doing. And I remember thinking back in the days when I was a judge, if the police did that of anybody that I had issued an order on, and they hadn't called me under those circumstances, I'd make sure the heads were rolled. And then the nurse was, as far as I'm concerned, her treatment should cause her to lose her license. And, this is an aside thing, but the ACLU has been working with the city on some of this stuff. And one of the things they're working on is getting the sentences cut and the bonds cut and things like this. Well, Boulder has got some occupiers, the same as Wall Street occupied Berkeley, occupy Podunk, whatever. And typically, like in most cities, you have the protesters, and then you've got some homeless people and things like that when they start camping. And you've got an administration that's used to zero tolerance from the Reagan years, that are used to, since we have a police state, We don't debate anymore. The police issues orders and you're expected to obey. And the First Amendment is kind of inconvenient, which we saw in Oakland. So, well, no, the officials don't have a real appreciation for the Constitution, and the ACLU is trying to tune them in. But if you've got numbnuts interpreting the Constitution through the ACLU, we're in trouble. So what happened in Boulder is they had an ordinance that protest and the protesters and the campers and that, the offense would be a petty offense that carried no jail time at all. And at the debate in front of the town council, they said the intention of doing that was to cut out trials for the Occupy people, because they arrested some of the Occupy people for trespassing when they told them to dismiss. And every one of them asked for a jury trial. And they said something like, well, these lawyers are asking for jury trials and clogging our dockets and things like that, and we don't want to have our dockets clogged with trespassing cases. So I was livid. I called up the head of the ACLU in Colorado and asked him what the hell he was thinking, and I got to credit him for this. He didn't hang up on me, and I was rather loud and positive, you might say, in my language. But he said one of the dumbest things I've ever heard about protesting. He said, well, we've been trying to get Boulder to reclassify a lot of their municipal offenses as having no jail terms. So we endorsed this because we didn't want to be inconsistent. Now I'm thinking that's got to be the dumbest goddamn thing I've ever heard from any kind of a political movement, because that's how you get the public educated. If you don't get the publicity, then protest becomes a rite of passage and nothing more. If Rosa Parks wouldn't have been subject to arrest and asked for a trial for not going to the back of the bus, we would never had the civil rights movement. And same with the Rocky Flats things and stuff like this. So one of the purposes of a jury trial in this kind of situation is to get the public debating things. Is it good policy or bad policy to knock off the campers or prosecute them or what? And the thing that really disturbs me about nationwide on this whole thing is you've got people that say, well, what do they want? What do they want? Things like this. Well, my view is that's what we pay these sons of bitches for, is to figure out things to solve some of these problems that we're protesting about. And rather than go interview some of these people and find out what their grievances are, find out what they're unhappy about, what do they do? Well, New York sends in the cops with the masks and the shields and beat the shit out of them and try to corral them and things like that, without anybody asking any questions of why are you here? What is the underlying reasons for this? And I saw this happen in Colorado with the so-called Tabor Amendment. People were frustrated over taxes, and they had the real conservative wing proposed an ordinance or a constitutional amendment to limit taxes, and the bureaucrats got afraid, and the government people got afraid, and they lobbied against it, and it got defeated. So they celebrated. In the next election cycle, the same type of bill came up and they fought it and it got voted down. But nobody in power started talking about the underlying causation of why the citizens were unhappy with the tax structure. So the last time around, they get the most draconian tax thing that they could ever be dreamt up by Bruce. And it passes. And it passed because the public was fed up, because they tried to send message and nobody was listening. And this, I think, is what's going on with the occupying stuff, the occupying movement. They're trying to get somebody's attention, and what they're getting is a reaction where they get their heads beaten in. And I think anybody who looks at television, some of the videos from some of these protests, to my way of thinking, there's no doubt that we're living in a police state just by the activity of the police. And that the First Amendment is a quaint thing from archaic past. And if you don't believe in the Constitution, then you're not going to follow it. And cops have got a history, as long as I've studied police and criminology, of not really liking the Constitution because they view it as an impediment to their power. And it's unfortunate. But the really unfortunate thing is the ACLU's unthinking, stupid, unconscionable position on this. Like, a protest doesn't matter. I'm just glad these dummies weren't around when the Chicago Convention happened in Chicago, because, or even, when I was in the Civil Rights Movement, it would have